have been running from June and will end in December. Each interview lasts for half an hour, and our listeners have the chance to ask questions by using the chat tab on the right-hand side of the WebEx platform at any time. So let me introduce our guest for today. Elisabeth Roberts is a training specialist at the UN Training Center, where she has been working since its creation in 2011. She coordinates courses on topics like CEDAW, gender-responsive budgeting, political participation, and migration. She also facilitates courses, especially on migration, and she has extensive experience in social work, research, and training in NGOs, public institutions, and the UN. She focuses on issues like local development, work insertion, and migration. Elisabeth has a master's in social sciences from Paris 5 Sorbonne in local development, from the Universitat de Caen in administration from the Dominican Republic, and a diploma in gender studies from the Universitat de Rennes in France. She's a French national, but she's been living in the Dominican Republic since 2000. So Elisabeth, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ria. Hello, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
it's a pleasure. No, of course, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I'd like to start maybe by asking you a little bit about your personal experiences of training for gender equality. So we'd like to know basically what prompted your interest in working in the field of gender equality, and especially issues like migration and local development, and specifically how you came to become a gender trainer.
Okay, so let's say that I'm 44, so maybe just to say that I studied in the 90s in France. And so when I was studying social sciences, I did a thesis on women entrepreneurs in Morocco. But at that time, I think I was not very conscious that I was working on gender issues, or none of my professors gave me advice or to read feminist, intellectuals, etc. So I'm thinking about that now, because I think now, there are many offers now in France and in Europe and other parts of the world on gender studies. But when I was a student, at least I was not so exposed to feminist theories, etc. So that I feel it's interesting to see the evolution too of the offer in academy about gender studies. And then when I arrived in the Dominican Republic, I started to work in social work, and I would say that I discovered feminism from this part of the world, in Latin America, no? So it was very different from the French or European, I would say, point of view. So I discovered that in social work with colleagues. And then on the topic on local development and migration, I started working on that a little bit. I was exposed in university and also in my work, no? So, and then when I started working with INSTRO, which is one of the ancestors of UN Women, I was working in the program of gender, migration, and development. It was mainly research on that topic. We did conferences, publications, we had a website. And then at the end of INSTRO, when we decided to do a manual, which name is Gender on the Move, on this topic, no? To be able then to deliver training on this topic. The manual condenses a little what the theoretical or conceptual framework of what we did in research, and gives examples, etc. So I would say that's a little bit my story. And then on training for gender equality per se, or training, we have a partnership with ITC-ILO, which is the, how do we say, center of training, of ILO. So I had the opportunity to go there and to take a training of trainers, to have some methodologies to be able to deliver a training. And then practicing with colleagues, we always learn, no? So I would say For me, I learned a little by doing. Also, when the TC was created as a team, we had to define methodologies, conceptual framework, etc. So I really learned by doing and,
Hmm.
experimenting and delivering trainings. And then you observe the other ones and you try to improve, no?
Yes, very much. I think it's a very good point to raise the fact that we learn from practice and also we learn as an ongoing process. Like it's never ending really. We keep
Never ending. It's
um,
always a new challenge, and yeah, I think especially for the type of training we are delivering, because it's always a different audience. It may be the same topic but with specificities or different contexts. So we always have to adapt and think again and again.
yes, I agree. And I wonder, then why do you think this type of training, the training for gender equality that you deliver at the training center and that the training center obviously espouses, why do you feel that that's very a particularly useful way of promoting women's rights or advancing their needs in terms of migration or local development?
In terms of training on gender equality, I feel that some people have had the opportunity to think about those issues, on gender equality, discrimination, gender gaps. But lots of people, including women, have not had this opportunity to stop and to think about their lives and gender imbalances and that kind of things, and that I can see in the groups when I deliver trainings. For instance, I was in Mexico with people who really, they work, it's in the program of Safe Cities. So they really work in transports, police. And one woman came to me and told me, it's the first time that I see that some people have thought about those issues, that there is, intellectual production about that, etc. So it was like all a word that she was discovering. And discovering that other people have thought about it and that you make part of another community, I don't know, to feel solidarity between women or the people thinking about those issues.
Hmm.
So I feel that the training is this, no? So a space to stop and think about your life, your job, and how gender influences that. And for other people who have already knowledge, as everything is changing, it's a moment to update your knowledge, to share experiences. So I would say the training per se is a privilege. I feel to it's a space where you can be 5 days thinking about gender. So I feel it's a
Hmm.
privilege really to be able to do that, and not everyone can do it.
Yes, I agree, of course.
And then so sometimes I insist when I do trainings to tell, okay, now we have kind of a responsibility, because we are privileged to be able to be in those spaces, and we should try now to raise awareness and to do what we can do at, at our scale, with your family, community,
Hmm.
job, etc.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the point. And then on migration per se, the migration was mainly thought about men migration. So uh, women migrants have always existed, but they were like invisible, no? So I don't know if we have so much time. Maybe I speak too much. I don't know. Just tell me.
No, no, not at all. Of course not. Of course not. Please continue. I wonder
So,
because, as you say, like women end up becoming sort of invisibilized, especially in spheres like migration, which tend to just focus on men, and they don't really tend to look at gender dimensions. And I wonder, like in this sphere, what kind of approaches do you use when you design and you deliver training? And you mentioned that we always have to keep recontextualizing and adapting training to the different participants, different needs. And I wonder, how do you do this? How do you contextualize your trainings?
okay. So I think um, Yes, you have. We try always to know our audience, no? But for instance, when I go to, I have sessions in the Labor Migration Academy organized by ITC ILO every year, and we don't know really who is our audience. So it may be people who work in international organizations or in NGOs or in governments, and they may know a lot about gender or not. So we have groups who are very diverse. So what I try to do is to start, some basics about gender to be sure that we are on the same page. And then what I like to do is to have like a dialectic approach. That means that instead of, feeding with concepts, I try to start from examples with a video, for instance, or a story, and ask questions about it. So, for instance, if we have a concept which is global care change in migration, or if we are speaking about human development, it's difficult to start a session, speaking about the concept. So maybe it's better to show a video and then to ask questions, and then you explain, what global care chains are, and then you try to ask them if they have examples in their own context, and that's how normally I like to proceed. Some people are used to that. Some others are not so used to that kind of approach, a dialogue. Some of them would like more, to have you as a teacher to deliver knowledge, etc. But I feel it's easier if we start from the experience of people.
Yes, I think that's very important. Yes.
And so what I feel as a challenge too is that you have different level of analysis: the micro, the meso, and micro, meso, and macro. So some people would be interested to have a broad analysis, what's happening in the world. Others would like, for instance, people who work attending women migrants victims of violence, they have more a micro approach. So sometimes it's difficult also to adjust depending on the scope of work people have. But we try to have exercises and techniques to be able to work at those different levels. I don't know if I'm clear about this.
Yes, very much so. I wonder because you spoke about... please go on.
What I see in gender and migration, for instance, working with ILO, that each agency has a vision to her. So ILO speaks a lot on protection, and that's right, that you have to be protected. Your rights must be protected. But as being from UN Women, our focus is a lot on women agency. Women have to be part of the solution. They are not dependent. They can be empowered, etc. So we have to find a balance between ensuring protection of women migrants, for instance, but also allowing them to participate, to have a voice, to be agents of change. Because sometimes we see women migrants only as victims, So we have to see both sides of the picture.
Yes, I think this focus on agency is very important, and we just received a question from one of our listeners, Pamela, who'd like to know about your experiences and of gender-responsive training for girls or young women who are migrants, or training for guardians of migrants, and also she'd like to know about what and where to explore this further with UN agencies.
Okay, so mainly, the trainings we deliver are not for the end users, let's say. That means that we are working with people who are planning or delivering services for migrants.
Mhm.
So I don't work specifically with migrants, but of course I'm a migrant myself, so I have people who are from the civil society or government who also are migrants, and they are part of organizations to defend the rights of women migrants, etc. So, but the question was on young women, no?
Yes, on young
Have,
women and girls.
yes. So I had an experience. It was very new for me. I went to India, to Hyderabad, to deliver a training because the state of Hyderabad had, they saw that they had a lot of women going to the Gulf to work as domestic workers, and there were a lot of violations of rights, etc. So they decided to train young people, mainly women from rural areas, so that those women and boys or men could give pre-departure trainings. That means that you try to raise awareness in the community about the risks of migration, but also, the rights that you are entitled to, and how to 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 confront challenges such as
Yes.
culture, etc. And that was very challenging because I think that those young women, it was like the first time that they were in that kind of training. And the person who was in charge of organizing or who recruited, let's say, those people, he was like a little bit authoritarian. So we had to, in the training, we saw that they were very, do we say timid? Come on,
Yes.
shameful or yes? So
Shy. Yeah.
shy, exactly. So we had to. They didn't speak so well English, so we had to speak in English, and then they translated in other language. So all our work at the end, we couldn't cover all we wanted to cover, but we tried really for them to understand some key concepts and to feel, more confident and empowered. And so I think, sometimes in the doing, in the training, you have to change a little bit your strategy. And I felt in that context, for instance, the most important was for them to feel that to think about gender, it was the first time they were thinking about it. So first of all, as a person, no, to feel confident that they have a voice. We also invited women migrants to tell their stories. So we really insist in that, no, that they are the experts. The women migrants are the experts, and let's hear to them, to their needs. So that is an experience I've had. And then with young people, I had an experience, but it was not in my work. It was personal in the school of my kids. So, and that was very interesting too. It was more on, professional orientation and segregation of labor market. So it was another experience, again, with a lot of games and quizzes, role plays.
Well, I think these are really good points about how, personal experience is really the center, I guess, of training for gender equality, and also that, these trainings should be interactive and they're not about sort of didactically telling people, this is what you need to know. It's more about getting them to think and encouraging them to think and to move and to participate and to, realize that they have agency and they have rights. And,
yes,
that
and
they're
also try to give some key concepts and maybe international legal framework, no, or national, or for instance, now we have the SDGs, we have always CEDAW. So I try for people to know those two references for our platform of Beijing. So those, at least that they know them and they can then continue to search,
Yes, of
on
course.
those topics.
It gives them a strong foundation, I guess. And I'm sure. But I wonder also, because when you're speaking about the person in India who is a bit authoritarian, I wonder, just maybe related to that, if when you're training on migration, because it's I suppose a sensitive subject for many organizations and many people, and I wonder if you've ever encountered any resistances to this kind of training, and if you have, how have you addressed these kind of resistances?
Well, there are different types of resistances. In fact, I think UNDP did a typology of resistances and
Really?
how you can respond to them. I like that. Sometimes I share that in training of trainers with participants. But for instance, in that training in specific in India, the thing is, after the training, they would be hired to be trainer themselves. So there was like a chantage. How do you say that? If you don't do well, then you would not be hired. So there was a sort of fear from people, no? So we tried, to say no, don't mind. The important is for you to think about it and try your best. You are doing well, etc. So it was quite challenges. Then other types of resistances, for instance, in a training on a training of trainers on migration. In fact, the first one we did here in Santo Domingo with international people from UN Women, government, civil society. There was we focused a lot on women migrants, and we always say that we are working on gender is not only women, So the one participant was very, he was a little upset about that. So what we decided to do is the fourth day or fifth day, we did an open space. So in an open space, you can propose a theme or a question, and people who are interested by this would say, okay, I want to discuss on this with you. So people just put their theme, and then they say, okay, let's meet at that point at that hour, and then they discuss, and then they come back and they say, okay, we've thought about it. So what we did is that person who wanted to speak about masculinities and the role of men in migration and more in that interactive relation, he had this space, to think about it with some colleagues, and then to come back and to explain what they thought about. And in fact, after this, for instance, when we went to India and Bangkok, we included a part on masculinities, and it was very important to do it. So we did new exercises, and so it's very important also to hear the resistances and to see if you can include them to improve the training then. Other kinds of resistances. Then I would say, for instance, I had in this program of safe cities in Mexico. It's not, the group was very good and interested. I can't say that they were resisting, but it was a training of trainer. When you ask them to deliver, to make it's like a laboratory, you ask them to do a session themselves.
Yes.
Then you can see that they have some stereotypes themselves. And they can express them when they are delivering their sessions. So, but you have to work on these and to be very patient and to say, the kind of example or remark you did, you are reproducing in some way stereotypes, etc. So I think we have to be very respectful also for those people when they do sessions themselves, because if they are new to the topic, of course it won't be, they can reproduce that kind of discrimination or stereotypes.
Of course.
Other.
And I wonder if one of the things that Pamela is asking as well, related to the point that you made before about with this experience of training young women in India and also in Bangkok, for example, is that do you think that UN agencies or international agencies generally that are involved with migration, are they valuing, the idea of training these kind of target groups of pre-departure training, for example, and of training young people, especially young women, but also young men? Is that also a focus really of migration training in general, or is that sort of not maybe as focused on?
Young men and young women as will to migrate, I suppose she's speaking about. Yes, there is all this new. I think there are lots of initiatives, yes, for pre-departure trainings, and of course also for young people. The idea is to have returned migrants, for instance, to be able to be involved in that kind of training so that they can tell their story, what worked well, what worked bad, what they should care about. In the Dominican Republic, for instance, there is an NGO working in a community with families who could migrate or have familiar abroad. So I think, yes, that normally you include all ages, no?
It should be quite expansive, I guess, because of due to age. And I wonder if you have, because when you speak, these trainings sound more like face-to-face trainings, but I know that the training center obviously also gives lots of online courses or blended courses. And I wonder, just perhaps not just related to migration, but also in general, do you what do you feel are the sort of benefits and advantages of online and blended and face-to-face? And what do you think maybe one of them lacks that the others make up for?
Yes, what I like in online trainings is that it's cheaper, and that's very important because there are a lot of people working in NGOs in particular, or even in government, local government, who cannot afford to travel and to have to spend time and to pay a face-to-face training of 5 days. So for me, it's very powerful to have online courses for this reason. And also, I feel that with the online modality, it's 2 months or 3 months, so we have more time to digest, to work step by step. So I think that's the good time, the good part. The problem we face is some people are not very used to that kind of technology. So we really have to help them to use it. Some people would not have access to, they don't have a computer or they don't have energy, so for some parts we should, I think we should partner with some NGOs who have programs for access to new technologies, to be able, so that people can connect. For instance, I had students from Senegal, and they had problems to be connected. Or
yes, of course,
in another country in Africa too. So what they did is they joined all of us. They were going to a place, to connect and to do the exercises, but they couldn't do it at home. So that's a challenge for some people. I feel, especially with Africa, it seems.
Maybe in also remote areas or rural areas, when you don't have such maybe good, internet connectivity or, broadband access, then it becomes a bit difficult to, take courses and to watch videos online, and, things that require more bandwidth can become, I guess, quite complicated for many people.
Sometimes we have, for instance, UN women colleagues from country offices, and they give scholarship for people from government and civil society to participate in a course. So UN Women would play that role, of facilitating access to the resources and to technology.
That's fantastic. And I wonder, because we're talking about sort of positive stories where women has facilitated learning through training. And I wonder if we could talk about one of your maybe more personal positive experiences, like if you have an example maybe of a motivational story from your training experiences where either you experienced or you witnessed change in participants or in yourself through training.
Okay, and in any modality, no?
In any modality.
When, as we said before, we always learn a lot. For instance, and when I was in this training for the program Safe Cities in Mexico, one of the participants did an exercise. It was, Safe Cities is about sexual harassment in public spaces. So she did an exercise which was very simple, think about a moment in your life that you were exposed to sexual harassment. How did you feel? What happened? And now, what would you like? What would you wish had happened? Do you understand? And so I did it myself, and I could remember, something that happened to me, and it was very powerful to do it. I had never really, I prepared the course with the other experts, etc. But sometimes just, take the time, do a little exercise, and think about it. And so you are touched personally, no? You appropriate a little the problem. So that kind of thing for myself, for instance, or I participated in courses, co-facilitated courses on masculinities. So really, some exercises are very powerful. I don't have time to explain everything, but it's important. And then from participants, as I said, in Mexico, for instance, that woman who say, wow, I didn't know that all this thinking was existing, so that's very good. Also sometimes, for instance, when I went to Labor Migration Academy, a woman would say, thank you for raising the voice of women. It's like a responsibility, yes, some people who feel that now they are clearer about what they want to do. We always try to have concrete exercises that they can apply to their context. For instance, we have another course on local development in Latin America and the Caribbean, and they do an exercise step by step, or in gender responsive budgeting too. So it's like a coaching. So it's very interesting for people, because then at the end, some of them would write an email and say, after this course, I could propose to my boss to do this and that. So you really feel that it was useful, that the training was part of a process.
Yes, I think a big process of change. I think your examples really showcase that and change at the individual level, and then taking it forward, as you said before, to change in societies and community and organizations.
I remember, for instance, another one. I did a little training here for UN police, and one on the masculinities and harassment and all that. And then that man came back to me, and he came to visit me here in the office, and he told me, this topic is so important and so huge here. I would like to really implement something to do training in that institution, and then this is the limitation, I would say, of our role of trainers, because I cannot do more. I cannot support to follow up on, they wanted to implement the same thing in another organization, and I cannot do that myself. So I felt a little bit helpless in that sense, but I hope he was able to move and to do things. So that kind of experiences, and many others.
I'm sure it's very, very positive and very inspiring, I think. And we've run out of time. for today. But I think thank you so much, Elisabeth, for taking your time today, and also, as you said, for raising the voice of women and migrants and of training trainers. And this was a really fascinating interview. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, or should we wrap up?
No, only thank you very much, and I'm available if anyone who hear the conversation wants to contact me. And best wishes for all the. I will see the other interviews to see what colleagues did.
Okay.
I saw some of them.
It's
interesting to have a space as trainers to be able to share our experiences too.
Exactly. I think trainers, you all do so much. So I think making your voices heard is a great pleasure, and I learned so much from all of you. So thank you very much. And I think it's we're going to upload this onto YouTube so that it's available for everyone who has access to the UN Women Training Center's YouTube channel, which is everyone who has access to YouTube. And so we hope lots more people will tune in and listen to this exciting interview. And thank you so much, Elisabeth, for being with us today. And I hope that many other people will benefit from the wealth of your experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you so
bye.
much.
Have a good
Bye
day.
bye. You too.